Hi, Jim.
Hi, Kate.
Okay,
Nice to
friends,
see you.
we're just waiting to get Grant into the room.
He's calling me.
Yeah, I see him.
Hey. Oh, there he is. No, he just hung
Yeah,
up on me.
Now he's in attendees. Okay, I'm going to bring him over.
You told me I was in some kind of practice session.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
so weird.
Well,
everyone.
until you officially start the thing, that's what it does.
Yeah, it told me I was in a waiting room or something like that. So, hi.
Yeah.
Hi, Grant.
I'm just renaming myself. All right, good. We're all here. Nobody else is, which has its pluses. But I will call this meeting of the Southborough Historical Commission to order. It's 7:04 p.m. and note that all members are present. Myself, Kate Battles, Andy Pfaff, Jim Blaschke, and Grant Farrington. So let's get straight to it. As you recall, in our last meeting on September 20th, we had Catherine McKee, the chair of the Trails Committee, here to talk about the Peninsula Trail and their plans for that and their interest in having historical help out in terms of signage and marking, because they plan to do, pretty extensive. You remember that conversation about, marking the trail and including both I'd asked that question about historical information, but also sort of flora and fauna kind of signage. And as part of that presentation from Catherine, she said that there was going to be this tour on October 8th and wanted to know, who among us could go. And I was a little iffy because I had already had plans, but make a long story short, thankfully Grant was able to go and took the walk and apparently was really, really interesting. So I asked Grant if he would mind presenting us just with a little rundown of what that was all about. So Grant, do you want me to make sure you can screen share? Because I
just put together a quick PowerPoint. So if you want to,
great. I'm going to make you co-host.
Okay, that'd be great.
Which you now are, and so you should be able to screen share.
Excellent. Just give me a second. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Excellent. Let's see here. This is mainly just it's a lot of slides, but it's mainly just pictures, so don't be too afraid. So yeah, as Kevin said, Kat invited us to what they were calling a history hike on the newly created Peninsula Trail, which just opened, I think technically a couple months ago, but this was kind of like the inauguration of it, and it was really great. It was a wonderful event. So yeah, it was on October 8th, and it was led by Department of Conservation and Recreation Ranger Andrew Leahy, who has responsibility. I think he's in the water division, and so he has responsibility for the Wachusett Reservoir and the Sudbury Reservoir here in Southborough. Yeah, so this is just a map of the trail system that I got from the Trails Committee website. Just to let you know where we were. We started at the Fable Hall, actually the parking lot for Fable Hall on Central Street. Walked down Central Street. I'm not sure if you can see my mouse or not.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yep. So we walked down Central Street, crossed, there's a police detail there that allowed us to cross Route 30 or Boston Road. And yeah, we took this new, this orange dotted line trail here, which is the new creation of the Trails Committee, and which, so it was great. And so yeah, we took it all the way up the peninsula and to the dam is where we ended. And eventually you'll be able to go all the way to, take it all the way through to Pine Hill Road, where there's other trails that hook up with Framingham. So I think that's this red one over here. But the final section of it hasn't opened yet. So we went to the dam and back. So just to give you a sense of, and I think it took about 2 hours, or maybe a little less. And yeah, there was a great turnout. I think there was, Kat said that they had a waiting list and that they capped it at 50. And I think there was about that many people there. So it was a success, I think. Yeah, so the ranger, Andy Leahy, shared some really great photographs of the of historic Southborough before the dam's creation. As many of you may know, the Sudbury Dam was constructed in the late 1800s. I believe it was about 1894 to 1897. And it was done so as a, to provide drinking water for Boston. And yeah, he gave a great overview of the history of the reservoir system, essentially how, as Boston continued to grow and grow throughout the 1800s, they kept on needing to find more and more water sources. And so they started with reservoirs in Newton and Wellesley, and essentially kept on expanding further and further west, building the reservoirs over in Framingham, off of Salem End Road, which is right next to, off of Oregon Road. Oregon turns into it right in Framingham. And then eventually the Sudbury Reservoir here, which at the time was one of the biggest waterworks projects ever attempted in the world, I think, at the time. And then eventually moving further out to the Wachusett and then the Quabbin. So yeah, I thought I would just share some photos. He shared a lot of these photos. Just wanted to preface it by saying that not all of these were the ones he shared, but these are the ones that I was able to find. There's a great website called Digital Commonwealth, which is a project by the Boston Public Library, which has a lot of these old photographs. And so as part of the creation of the dam, the entity that was constructing it took photographs of all the areas that they would be essentially affecting. And so these are all areas that have been destroyed and are now underwater. So there's some historic houses here. Just thought I would share some pictures.
My house was in the reservoir. Well, was where the reservoir is now.
Oh, is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So it was really just a fascinating, as we were going along the walk, there were some stone walls that were once part of Main Street. So if you think of Main Street turning into East Main and how it eventually ends at where Framingham Road is now, it used to continue beyond there all the way to where the peninsula that I showed the map of was as one contiguous stretch. And so, they sunk essentially half of, or a good portion of Main Street. And so we were seeing the stone wall of the other side. So, and apparently there were other ruins of, houses that had been knocked down and stuff like that, that are still in the woods over there. So.
Yeah, a number of years ago when they lowered the reservoir, I don't know if a bunch of you remember that, it was lowered enough that we could see a lot of the foundations of the houses like mine that were moved.
Oh.
Yeah.
Wow. So yeah, this is just a picture of, so this is Nichols of Nichols, is it Nichols Street or Nichols Road off of Clemens, and over off of Pine Hill. So that's, and I think I have a picture here. So really some quite striking houses, lots of big farmhouses and just quite amazing pictures, I think. So one interesting thing was that there were quite a few mills, grist mills, and this Nichols mill was a lumber mill, and I think I have a couple pictures of a grist mill, and I think there were up to, I can't remember the exact number, I think there were 6 or 7 mills that were in this section of kind of rural Southborough that were, if you were farming or whatever, you'd bring your grain down there, your lumber to be cut. So here, here's a picture of the Nichols Mill, which is the lumber mill. This one I think is my favorite photo that I found. Just quite a nice stone building. Again, this is near Sawins Mill, which I believe was the grist mill. And there is a person there. I don't know if you saw him at first. He's kind of blends in. And so, yeah, this was a picture of the landscape before the, so I'm not sure exactly where the water goes up to now, but I have a picture of it later. But essentially what they did was, in order to preserve the water quality, they stripped all of the organic matter from the top of the, the topsoil to prevent, the water, the drinking water from being contaminated. And so I have a picture of that later on. But so yes, they went through and stripped it, and I believe that they kept a lot of the stone walls because that didn't affect the drinking water. But so there might be foundations or stone walls underwater, but currently, they removed a lot of the dirt and actually built up. They didn't move it far; they moved it to the outside of where the reservoir is now to kind of create a basin, which I thought was interesting. Yeah, there was actually an old chair factory, which was in the sunken, or the now sunken area. So this was, I believe, a picture of the chair factory being, destroyed as part of the, my understanding, and I did ask, was that a lot of these people were, given settlements and essentially payouts to, evacuate the area. So they were paid, but of course they were also losing livelihoods and stuff like that. And here's a picture of the grist mill, which I think was also where that stone building was earlier.
Yeah, AKA Deerfoot Chapel now. That's what that building is.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, yeah.
The stone, oh, so the Deerfoot Chapel was from Sawins Mill?
Yeah, well, the mill was across the street from, but that earlier photo you had is the same building. Yeah.
Oh, that could be why I like it so much. I didn't even very cool.
And then he lived across the street at 10 Lettuce Cloma too.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Very cool. And this was a later picture. So all those pictures that I just showed were from 1893, which is before the construction. The construction started in 1894, and I think went until 1897. And so this is from 1896, which I think, so they were able to stay at their mill for, a few more years before eventually having to evacuate. So I also, again, all these photos are from digitalcommonwealth.org, which is just a wonderful website for all sorts of old Southborough photos. And so, yeah, I just had some pictures of the construction of the dam itself, which of course created the reservoir that we see today. So I am not going to attempt to explain what exactly is going on in each of these photos, but thought you just might like to see the dam under construction. This is an old excavator, so before modern technology. So this is what I was referring to earlier. This is them stripping the hillside of organic matter. I think they took essentially 6 feet of soil off the top or something down to rock or something along those lines in order to make sure that the water wasn't contaminated by organic matter. So this was the picture of the completed wall of the dam, which was completed on September 21st, 1897. So this was the first photo taken of it. And this, for those of you who don't know, this dam is, located off of, I guess it's Boston Road. You can see it if you're driving by there on the way to Framingham. And this was a later picture, but I just thought I'd throw it in here. This is from 1915, and it looks pretty much exactly. This is the circular dam off of Middle Road, and looks pretty much exactly the same today. So yeah, that's it for my photos. It was just a wonderful hike, and Andy Leahy did a great job explaining the history, and thought I would share some of it with you.
Awesome, Grant. Thank you. I mean, and I think, going forward, what I'd like to do is, continue to stay in touch with Catherine McKee, and then, my attitude toward this is, whatever services they need from us, we should be ready to do it. So I'll reach out to her and see in terms of next steps or what their timetable is and when they want some input or just another set of eyes to look over what they're proposing to put on the signs. And, maybe we have some sign talk next. They'll be interested in the vendor that we used, or, for the historic district signs. So anything else in that, Grant, at the moment? Or
no, as you said, I think Kat had mentioned that they're going to be looking to make those signs within the next couple months, but I haven't heard anything outside of our previous meeting. So, well,
good. I mean, I can certainly reach out to her if and I'm more than happy to sort of pass some of this responsibility along to anybody that wants to sort of step up and be involved in this. Grant, you sound like you'd be, since you're now very familiar with it, you might be a good person to use for that. So, all right, I'm gonna hold you to it.
Thanks, Grant. That was great.
No problem.
All right, so we'll move on. And now it's item 3, which is update on signage for the South Rural Center Historic District. And I have on our agenda here, this involves Kate, Annie, and myself, because the end of last week, the 3 of us went out with this bad boy that you see behind me, which is the sort of full size mock-up. And it looks pretty small, but I assure you, Grant and Jim, it's quite generous. And we discovered that if nothing else, I would make for an excellent lamppost.
Yeah, excellent. You don't want to share those photos I took?
No, they're not handy, but we actually went out to a couple of the locations. I served as fence post or lamppost or signpost, held it in what we thought, based on the specs, is the right height. Annie and Kate looked, and I must say that I think Annie then swapped out with me so I could have a fair look at it. And I got to tell you guys, we really, really liked what we saw. We're the size wise, it's especially because we were very concerned, and this is why, we went to the trouble, or Annie went to the trouble of having it mocked up full scale, because we don't want to make a mistake, being too big. I was concerned about possibly even being too big, so that, you don't want to have this kind of, because these are neighborhoods, that it's going to somehow be disturbing, but you don't want it too small either. So when people are speeding up, Corderville Road, and they get to that sign, which will be roughly about probably on golf course property, as you come up toward the rural cemetery, but on the other side where the golf course is, one of the tee boxes, let's say, that you don't miss it. So it's a fine, balance between too small, too big, want to get it just right. And I think we did. Really happy with it, because you can see it, but it's not too big or too obnoxious. And so I want both Kate and Annie to throw in their thoughts, but the last thing I'll say about this is that the one, for Jim and Grant's sake, that the one thought we had about this wording and design and everything that we approved last time is, if you look at that, we all felt that the town seal at the top of it was just a smidgen too large, and that there wasn't enough sort of negative space at the top of the arc, like between the logo and the top of the sign. And so if I can share my screen, I will bring up, Annie was really great about this and actually went to the length of, let me try to bring this up. Can you see that?
Yep.
Went back to our vendor and asked them to size down the town seal just a hair. And now that I block it now by doing that,
No, it's perfect.
So we can
you
see.
can still see it okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so Andy, they reduced it by in diameter, I believe, from 8 inches to 7.
Yeah, approximately that scale of reduction.
Right. And so, and you know, I mean, Annie expressed to them that what our concern was with that area at the top, that there be sort of enough space. And so they reduced it. And I'm really, I mean, as happy as I am with what you have behind me, I'm even more delighted with this slight revision. And Annie, is it safe to say that you were happy as well?
Oh yeah, the change is very subtle, but I feel like it's just enough to make the impact that I was hoping to see. Everything else being the same, so I'm quite happy with this revision.
Yeah, I love it. It makes all the difference in the world to me, but it's still will be quite legible, and it makes this sort of nice visual impact. And I just remind everybody that, of course, the final sign is going to look even way better than this because it's all this raised lettering. So it'll have all this depth and sort of texture, that a flat, kind of poster size rendering of it can't have. But so I don't, Kate, what do you want to add to this? I mean,
Nothing really. Like I just that the seal, I just needed to be a little bit more on scale with the rest of it. That's why we decided to shrink it down a little bit. But otherwise, I think it really looks lovely. I think while it's big and it's readable as you drive or walk by, it also blends in nicely with the neighborhoods because of the color of the sign and all that. So I think they're beautiful. Really.
And I think the black pole will be sort of nice, again, more very unobtrusive. We're trying not, everybody's kind of in a way concerned about sign pollution. And I think I think people that have them or near their property are, of course, this is, in the public right of way kind of thing, like putting up a road sign, but I think people will be quite pleased, for sure. And they do look, I mean, it looked really good just in the mock-up, holding it out on the street. All three of us were delighted. So I just wanted Grant and Jim, you to have a chance to sort of see it. And like, you really actually do see the difference. I don't know, again, if
Oh, you can tell. You definitely can.
difference between the way that is up at the top
Yeah.
and what we got here. So it's all exactly the same, except this is just slightly smaller so that you have more of a balance, a gap kind of there at the top of the sign. So
I think it looks very, very distinguished. It's going to show very well throughout the town. I think I may have passed along, I know we've iterated this meeting maybe too many times. I passed along one comment by email that if you wanted to increase the readability a little bit, you could take the bottom 2 lines and make it a single line, simply put U.S. Department of the Interior, and then you'd have more vertical spacing between everything else. But I'm chiming that in late in the stage, but that's the only thing I would do if you ask me about readability.
I think that, I mean, personally, that was one thing that we talked a lot about on site, the sort of legibility of it. And actually, I personally was quite pleased with the, having it as a 2-line thing at the bottom. And one thing I would say, Jim, about it is that, correct me if I'm wrong, Annie, that we've looked at so many of these signs and they always actually sort of spell it out
Yeah.
in full. So that's the only reason I would, I appreciate the comment. I think I would be against abbreviating.
Okay, it's only
That's just sort of standard. I think it's the standard way it's written.
Yeah,
Jim, and you'd be
Okay.
surprised, and I agree with that you want to make the focal information as readable as possible, but when you see it in real life, it's amazingly readable. And I think you actually wouldn't necessarily want some of the writing, the fonts of the other stuff actually any bigger. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I'll just add, I also think you wouldn't want the font any smaller as well. Like if you had to reduce it a little bit to get all that, the last two lines condensed down to one, I think it might affect the readability negatively.
Okay, then I certainly make that as an observation. It's not anything I feel strongly about. I'd vote to keep it as is.
fair enough. Grant, any thoughts? Oh, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Yeah, no, I was. I think it looks great. I was trying to look at the side by side of Kevin's background and the photo at the same time, and I can see the difference. So I think the reduction in size of the seal makes sense, and I think I'm happy with this as the final design.
It was very, and I have to say it was very, I think, sharp-eyed of Kate and Annie spotted that, and I don't know which one of you said it first, but they were dead on, because I looked at it and I'm like, yeah, you're right. It's got to go down just a little bit, and I'm so happy that Annie, you were able to turn that around so quickly with the vendor and get it to us for tonight. I don't know if anybody, please absolutely speak your piece before we do this, but I would be very happy to entertain a motion to approve this as the final and get on with it. I got to go to Vanessa Hale and basically get some money. And there's another aspect of this to talk about, but I think if we approve, these would be for the, I don't want to say this wrong, 7 signs. It would be on Lattisquama, on School Street, on Middle Road, on Marlborough Road, heading south, on Corderville Road, heading north, and then east and west on Main Street. Those are the 7 points of entry to the district. So if we can get this voted on and approved, I'll get going with Vanessa and we'll try to get this money and get this thing ordered. Because boy, would it be great. See these go up next spring, because they take several months, by the way. Right, Annie? How long?
Yeah, their latest estimate, when I checked at the onset of this project, was 5 months. And that's just because these signs, these particular ones are so large and there's so many of them, that it's quite a large lead time, for their operation.
So hopefully, maybe late next spring, early summer, these go up and people see that, gotten something done on this, and their ARPA money is showing some results. So I'm very happy. I have to say, Jim and Grant, if you had sort of been on, so we were kind of giddy little kids with how nice it sort of looked, and you feel like we've been through this for a long time.
So I move to accept the design as currently shown, the latest one.
Second.
Well, that's all we need, right? So then we get a roll call vote. And I'm picking up Kate's script here, her template for this, so I make sure I do it right.
I just had a quick question before we vote.
Yeah, sure.
In terms of the installation, is this something that the DPW does, or is it the company itself that will come out and install them, or how does that work?
No, we have to work with DPW, as I understand. And when I was working on this, and for instance, talking to Jason Malinowski and kind of asking, because he's got sort of more experience in this whole racket than I do. He said, yeah, we'd work now. It'll be a new DPW head, I guess, by the time we get these signs or an acting or whatever it is. But we would work with DPW to try, and that, because I think that was when I made the quip that, if necessary, I'll dig the holes myself, and pitch in whatever it takes to get these installed. We'll do it. So, and then they may want, but my understanding is that it would be a DPW cooperation. So, at the appropriate time, I do want to reach out to them and just sort of let them know this is coming down the pike, and maybe they can really help us in terms of, we know where they need to go, but obviously it'll be in consultation and with their expertise and approval in terms of exact placement, because I'm sure they have, certain kind of safety considerations and other things that have to be considered. So, and actually, now that you mention it, I mean, it may be good for me to reach out to them now and just start the conversation, because I don't want to blindside anybody, but until we got to the point where we were actually able to order these things and we know that they're going to take 5 months to get, it's kind of no point. So, but that's a good, I'm glad you brought that up. So with that said, motion has been made and seconded. Roll call vote. Miller, yes.
Adels, yes.
Reschke, yes.
Pfaff, yes.
Harrington, yes.
All right, thank you so much. 5-0, let it be noted. And so that aspect of the signed thing is complete. Now, as you know, in the ARPA grant, we were, also given money, and the feeling was at the time for these 3 additional signs that we felt would be appropriate to mark the old burial ground, the library, and the townhouse. And since then, as we've discussed, that aspect of it is a little bit more complicated. And we'd come to this decision that the one for the old burial ground really it was going to amount to a kind of sign pollution, because there's a very similar marker in the OBG, like right next to the flagpole. Actually, it's on a rock, and it marks the old with they remember I was telling you they spell it on that sign oldie burial ground, which I'm not a big fan of, as I find it a little twee, but so there was really sort of no point in doing that. And so I think I had suggested, and I think everyone agreed that if we can get through this process, because there's a little flux in the budget, and I had talked to Jason about how that works. Like, what if there's some kind of overage that comes up, and that you do it on a sort of contingent basis. But so we had a little pocket of reserve basically by cutting that one sign. And the other question was signs for library and townhouse. And the library conversation has been a little bit more involved, I guess, than I had anticipated. And there's a lot of factors in there, and I'm very respectful of the parties of Ryan Donahue, the library director, and Marguerite Landry, the head of the library board of trustees. They have a lot of things that they're balancing over there. And one of them actually is this issue of sign pollution. They have a lot of signs. They already have a sign to the left, a small bronze plaque to the left of the front door, marks the donation, sort of founding the library. They've got, of course, story walk signs. They've got that one large sign like out by the walkway, to the, what would that be, like the east of where the chessboard currently is. They've got other signs by the door. They got a lot of signs, right? And so, Ryan's concerned about that. Marguerite's concerned about that. There's a lot of sort of negotiating going on there. I mean, I know there's some talk about even moving the library at some point to Woodward if that ever goes down the road. So there's a lot of moving parts there, and it's a little complicated. And I think they actually have somewhat mixed feelings about the whole thing. I mean, they realize that it's kind of a red letter day in a certain sense, but it's complicated, and they haven't come to any kind of feeling about what or if they actually what they want to do in that point. So there's that. The other aspect of this is the townhouse, which is also getting a little sticky lately. I believe I heard John Parent, what call was it? just the other day, I guess it was the select board last week, talking about the fact that the library, or I'm sorry, the townhouse exterior renovations may be on hold for a while because there's some difficulties apparently there that are sort of beyond my pay grade or non-pay grade. So this sort of blends into, so we have those two signs, right? And it's somewhat a more difficult thing. The key ones are, of course, the 7 signs actually marking the entry points to the district. I mean, that was the, this is it's 7 of originally 10 signs, but in my personal view, it's 98% of what we were trying to accomplish in this whole thing. And these other things are sort of gravy. So while those issues sort of hang fire, and I, have sought to make some headway on the subject, there's the next item on our agenda. I think this actually plays into the sign. So if with your sufferance, I'm going to hold on this sign business and move into the next item on our agenda, which is a discussion of the flags in the old burial ground, and explain to you why I see these two items as linked, if that's okay. So item 4, discussion of flags in the old burial ground. This is a very, 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 very complicated issue. And let me just, Jim, were you at town meeting or unable to attend?
I was not in attendance, no.
Okay, so I know Grant was there, Kate was there, Annie was home with Dottie, but watching, I believe. So let me just, for the sake of the record and for Jim to catch you up.
I did read the summaries afterwards, so I'm up to speed on most.
Good. All right. Well, I just want to sort of clear and just make sure for the record, our own records, that as quickly as I can, what has gone on. We all know that the flags are an issue. We knew that there was a warrant article coming regarding a proposal to remove the commemorative, the battle flags that are arrayed 3 to one side, 3 to the other of the only permanently installed flagpole in the old BG, and that those 6 I would describe as sort of an ad hoc arrangement of flags are these battle flags, and that they've been very controversial. And so, I knew this was coming down the pike. I had been doing, over a fair period of time, my own research on it. So I was prepared and kind of ready for anything that might have been coming, and with an awareness of the Warren article that was pending. So the last time we met on September 20th, that afternoon, looking at other agendas, I saw the select board's agenda for the same night, the 20th, and that they had a discussion of whether or not to ask the Historical Commission for advice on the subject of those battle flags on their agenda. And so that's why, on our meeting that night, I said, I told everybody, I told you all that was on their agenda. I didn't know how they were going to vote. I hoped they would vote yes to solicit our advice. And as I said, be ready, do your research, do your homework, do your own independent thinking about this. And if we were asked, I was going to promptly call a meeting immediately before town meeting. We would hack it around, see what everyone had to say, and offer that advice. So at that meeting, I logged off of our call and went straight to the select board, and I was in time to catch them talking about this. And because other folks had seen it, there was a pretty large contingent representing the veteran service organizations in town, to wit, the VFW and the not Foreign Legion, American Legion, sorry, the American Legion and VFW, Mr. Kalenda and Mr. Wynot. and supporters. And so they spoke actually at length. We're given the opportunity in public comment, and they talked, made their case for keeping the flags, and they wanted them there. And the Historical Commission was actually invoked quite a bit in the conversation, essentially just saying, we've already heard from the Historical Commission. We don't want you, Select Board, to ask the Historical Commission again, because there was this discussion, a year or two ago about this. And we already know what they're going to say. And it was that part of it that I don't take any of this personally, but it just bothered me a little bit as the chair of Historical, because I had just given you all instructions, urgings to go do your own thinking, do your own homework and think independently for yourself and come back and just tell us what you think. And I would have noted, if I'd had the opportunity, that the Historical Commission has had some turnover since the last time this was taken up. There's a new chair, there's new members, and people's thinking evolve. And the circumstances, of course, certainly changed since then too, because there's now a Supreme Court decision that has to be taken into consideration. So there was a good deal of talk about, again, the Historical Commission, the veterans having got their people out that night, sort of, in my mind, sort of dominated that conversation, which is fine, that's their right. But when it came to town meeting, and again, the Historical Commission was repeatedly being invoked, and I felt that since, quite frankly, I supported the article personally for the flags. And so, eventually I got up during the debate and tried to explain that I was not speaking on behalf of the Historical Commission because I had no mandate. However, I identified who I was, and I explained what the circumstances were that, what I just reiterated to you, that, I had seen the Select Board agenda for the 20th. The chair and, Mr. Stivers were in support of seeking our advice and input, but they were outvoted 3-2, and that I certainly didn't take it personally. I just assumed that the dissenters in that vote wanted to have the conversation at town meeting, which was fine. But circumstances being what they were, I, as the chair of the commission, found that we had been referenced quite a bit, but that I had not had the opportunity to let you guys speak your piece about it, so that I was nonetheless getting up to explain what the situation was and why I was speaking simply as a private citizen and not on behalf of the Historical Commission, even though that we had a very heavy stake in this. And the reason, by the way, I didn't call a meeting, even in spite of the no vote by the Select Board on the 20th to seek our advice, because I felt on the one hand that I had every right to convene my own commission, and us to talk about whatever the hell we wanted to. But I felt that under the circumstances, it was appropriate and respectful to honor the Select Board's decision at that time, right? So when I got up and spoke at town meeting, one of the things, it was very, very, very important for me to establish in the conversation that the Select Board is not the enemy of the veterans groups in town. In fact, from my perspective, quite the opposite. Both by family history and by my own temperament, I'm very much inclined to sort of defer to those folks when at all possible. I have a great deal of respect for those men and women and for their service. And, I was up there to say that I wanted, both personally and as to the degree that I could influence the Historical Commission, to do everything we possibly could to be respectful toward the vets and to give them the treatment and deference that they deserve. And the main thing I had to say at town meeting on that score, because I didn't really want to get, other people were talking about the Shurtleff versus Boston Supreme Court decision, which, I would note was a 9-0 decision. essentially asserting, and full disclosure, I don't have a law degree. There was a lot of talk about people who have law degrees and people who don't. And fortunately, an understanding of the law isn't confined to lawyers, and that anybody who cares to do the work and do the reading, and we have an active legal press in this country that sets out to explain things to lay people like us, what the law is. I felt I have a pretty good understanding that the implications of Shurtleff v. Boston is that unless the town of Southborough adopts those flags as town speech, they're going to have a very hard time turning away any group that wants to fly their own flags in a similar array, because you can't allow one group to fly flags and deny another. And this is somewhat complicated by the fact Mr. Wynot is the official veterans graves agent for the town. And one of the points I made when I spoke at the select board meeting last week was that I certainly respect that job, that title, that task, Mr. Wynot, all the wonderful work he does, and he does some tremendous things for the town. However, being veterans grave agent is not co-equal with being superintendent of the old burial ground. And that is sort of the way things seem to be run currently, without a firm hand being laid down by the select board on the subject. So, but the main thing I had to say at town meeting, and I thought it was extremely important, was that because I'm concerned about respecting all parties. For instance, I said in both occasions at town meeting and at the select board last week that I take the veterans absolutely at their word, that these flags mean a lot to them, that they care deeply about them. They feel that they're very important to them. And furthermore, I take them absolutely at their word when they talk about the fact that they reject the association that some of those flags have come to have for a great many people with extremist groups, right-wing, nationalists, various racist or extremist groups, and that they bristle at the idea that that's what those flags represent for some people, and they sort of reject those associations. I take them absolutely at their word at that. I take them absolutely at their word that those flags are important to them. At the same time, I take at face value and at their word the people that say they are quite upset by them, and that they are, triggering, and that this was not a sort of trumped up argument just to cause trouble, but in fact, there are people who are deeply offended and wounded by those flags, just as there are people on the other side for whom they are very deeply and emotionally important. So, my attitude was respecting the opinions of both sides. What really is right and honorable and respectful treatment? And so my main point at town meeting was that I had reached out to the publicity director at the National Cemetery in Bourne and pointed out that this is one of a system of national cemeteries in the same category as Arlington National Cemetery, down in Bourne, adjacent to Otis Air Force Base, 750 acres that contains the remains of some 80,000, U.S. servicemen and women. And when I, contacted the public relations associate there, I had a couple of questions for him. I said, I asked him, what flags do you fly? And specifically, when and under what circumstances do you fly historic battle flags? And this gentleman, Robert Belcher, brought in both the assistant director and the director. The director's a guy named Mark Pollan, because he wanted to make sure he gave me the exact right information. So the director, the assistant director, and the PR associate were all involved in this email string. And the answer I received back was that the only flags we fly are the US flag and the POW MIA flag. Typically that flies, the POW MIA flag flies on the same standard just beneath the US flag. They display the VA flag, that's the Department of Veterans Services flag, on Memorial Day only. And as to the specific question about historic battle flags, they are not flown on the cemetery grounds, quote, no matter the occasion, ever, never. And one thing I pointed out at the select board meeting last week when I followed up on this in an attempt to sort of clarify and to somewhat expand my comments was that this is not a policy that's a whim of the folks in Bourne. So it's not just limited to Massachusetts. This is all national cemeteries which fall under the VA as a cabinet agency. All national cemeteries, including Arlington National Cemetery, prohibit the flying of battle flags of any kind at any time. And I think the reasons for that are fairly obvious. They become these very, for many people, divisive symbols, and it's very hard to adjudicate what flags are right and what flags are wrong. You know, I'm sure you all have done your research on these flags. I've done my research on these flags. You know, some of them have some clear associations with New England. Some of them don't. Gadsden flag from South Carolina, that's the snake, the severed snake, that's quite controversial. The Damari Nolo flag, which was originally a first Pennsylvania Rifles flag, that's the I refuse to be subjugated flag that has become quite politicized for some people. The Liberty flag, AKA the Moultrie flag, which is also from South Carolina, doesn't have New England connections. And even some of the ones that do, for instance, the pine tree flag, that's the one that's a field of white with a green pine tree. And in the incarnation, which flies at the old burial ground, it also bears the slogan, "An appeal to heaven." And you know, my research notes that that remains the official maritime ensign of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. However, the script was removed from that flag by the Commonwealth 51 years ago in 1971. So, you know, there's the historical argument about the flags to be made. However, my approach to this was I have no interest personally, and I'm dying to hear what you folks want to say about this, but I personally have absolutely no interest in arguing the specific merits or demerits of these flags. Like I said, I am what, you know, one of the things that actually Mr. Kalenda said in his presentation at town meeting was that he was not making the assertion that anyone buried in the old burial ground ever fought under or carried, let's say, the Gadsden flag, but simply that those flags were appropriate to the period and that they like them and find them therefore appropriate. And, you know, my comment at the select board last week was that I find that a tenable argument. If that's the argument you want to make, that simply they don't need to represent the people in I will say, and I did say, that's not the position that I would take, certainly as the chair of a historical commission. But I accept their argument. I mean, I find myself wanting to accept the VSO representatives' arguments at face value, because there's no point in arguing the merits of the flags. I don't think you're going to move anybody. And I certainly don't think you're going to move people by telling them that something that they love and find important to them is racist. I have my private thoughts about all those flags, but I'm going to keep my private thoughts about those flags private, because I feel like as a representative of and a chair of a historical commission in town government, it's my obligation to try to be respectful of people on all sides of this argument. And so, again, I accept that these are important to the veterans. I accept that they reject any inflammatory associations. However, at the same time, I accept utterly at face value that these flags are deeply triggering to some people. So in reaching out to the folks in Bourne, first I wanted to establish, well, what is respectful treatment? Because the VSO folks have sort of contended that it is a kind of, even though we know from some excellent research done by Sally Waters that fewer than 8% of the people buried in the OBG are military veterans of any kind, that this is largely, this is a civilian cemetery by definition, and that the vast majority of folks who are buried there are either women or children, and so the very small percentage of veterans. And so, but just, again, assuming that we wanted to treat it as if it were a military cemetery, what is respectful military treatment? And the answer is, from the National Cemetery folks, again, that falls under the VA, they're the people that administer this, is that they only fly the American flag, period. And they fly, the POW MIA flag, by the way, flies within sight of the OBG down the hill at the All Veterans Memorial. So what I urged town meeting, and again at the select board, meeting the other night, was we've got one flagpole, it should fly one flag and one flag only, the flag of the US. This is the flag that whatever side of this argument you're on, you should be able to agree on. And so that's the essence of my feeling about this, that to me, in a way, it's a kind of easy one if you can get the veterans to sort of see. And I make a kind of, I want to appeal to those folks in a way that, and I think I made this comment at some point in all this, was that, in a way, to me, a cemetery is not a place to reenact battles, for instance. They bring out those kinds of battle flags at Lexington and Concord on, April 19th every year, Patriots Day, and do battle reenactments. But a cemetery ought to be a place of peace and rest. It's the place where a warrior, in this case, men who fought in, early battles, are reunited with wives and children in death. It's not a place to sort of beat the drums of war. It's a place of peace and rest, and where everybody is reunited under the one flag we should all be able to agree on. It's not a theme park. It's not a place for display or political statement, quite frankly. I don't want to see, part of the reason I want a resolution on this is because I don't want to see, there's already another group that's come forward. I think you all know about what it is, that's proposed putting up another array of flags, a kind of counter statement. And it doesn't matter which way you lean politically. Again, I don't want to be disingenuous and suggest that I don't have my own politics, but I want in this matter to keep my politics to myself and offer and to try to bridge these groups together by uniting under this one, the one flag of our country. And so to me, the argument is very compelling that national cemeteries essentially only fly the US flag. Again, they fly the POW MIA flag, but I don't think that's appropriate in this particular cemetery. Now, the last thing I'll say, and this is where I now want to just hand it over to you folks and hear everybody say their piece on this, please. That I said to the select board the other night, I really, really want the veterans to know, this is an important point to me, that the Historical Commission is not an enemy here. I want to be those folks' friend. I think that's an important, the Historical Commission, part of the history that we're noting is the history of people who served our country. So I really would like to sort of change the sort of dynamic and the atmosphere and the feeling, frankly, that some people seem to hold toward us. And I noted that I don't think people like, veterans in general and Mr. Wynot and Kalenda in particular, get where they've gotten in life by ceding ground easily. I know it's a very difficult thing for them. I would, basically what we're asking them, by asking them to accept this, which I think would be the best path, we're asking them to give something up, something that's important to them. And I think to me, it feels like the right thing to do is to try to give something back, to give something in return. And I thought, well, can we offer, for instance, a more lasting memorial than a bunch of temporary flags stuck into little sleeves in the ground that never seem to stand up very well, And it occurred to me, in Sally Waters's research, and I believe Mr. Kalenda's in agreement with this, that, let's see, she notes, this is Sally, that there are 25 unmarked graves that are of Revolutionary War veterans. So the good many, just taking that thing, and I've got some other data here, I don't see right at my fingertips. But the point is, there are quite a number of unmarked graves of veterans. Could we do something about that? Specifically, what I had a thought of were two things. One is some kind of plaque, monument, bronze marker in the old burial ground, possibly like the one that's already there, where you affix it to a stone, or it's like embedded in a stone. So it has this feeling of being both organic, but quite permanent, in which we would list those, the unmarked graves of all the military veterans. And so they would have some sort of permanent memorial. Secondarily, or perhaps along with it, or alternatively, the old burial ground is in dire need of tree work, specifically tree replanting. I mean, I don't know how often you guys get down there, but there are a number of stumps. It's a bad, it ought to be a shady, again, very restful seeming place. And one of the things that I thought about was, wouldn't it be great to be able to plant and dedicate, again, in consultation with a certified arborist, the Liberty oak, the Liberty chestnut, the Revolutionary chestnut, call it what you will. Someone's going to have a better idea than I have. But in other words, to plant some sort of tree that would be dedicated, marked, maybe there's a marker out front of it, or maybe when it gets big enough, it's on the tree, that marks this as a tree that we have planted, that the town has planted, to commemorate either the unmarked or both marked and unmarked, or all the graves, or just to honor the veterans who are buried in the old burial ground. In other words, can we offer, instead of those flags, something that would be deeply meaningful to them? I would like to make that gesture. And the reason this ties back to the signs is because I thought to myself, quite frankly, we still have sort of the 3 signs that are uncommitted. I would, in a heartbeat, we've got our 7 that actually mark the entry points to the district. That was the main goal. I would be all for the Historical Commission. This is my own idea. You tell me what you think about it. Of us putting our money where our mouth is and kicking back, it'd be about $2,000, I believe, back toward something that would commemorate the unmarked veterans' graves in the OBG, or that would plant some very special tree or some combination of both, and the library can figure out their sign issues on their own. And the townhouse, whenever that project gets done, you know, there's going to be funding and grant money to get, if they want a National Register sign on that building, they can get it. But I would propose showing the veterans, you know, like I said, that we care. And at the same time, we're trying to heal a really nasty division in the town in the most respectful way possible. One flagpole, one flag. Get rid of the clutter, get rid of the battle flags, make it a place of rest, but let's give something back to our veterans, something that would be really meaningful to them. And I'm willing to put, like I said, our money where my big mouth is. So can we just, Kate, Annie, Jim, Grant, anybody want to talk? I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, because I felt like I've been doing too much yammering and trying to, you know, walk this tightrope of, like I said, I have my private feelings about these flags. Let's make no mistake about it. But it's so important for me not to, you know, for us to feel like a divisive force in this. I would like to try to feel like a group that can help. I'm not trying to win an argument here. I'm trying to make a difference in this whole thing. So,
Kevin, I'll go first if you don't mind. As you know, I unfortunately have a hard stop before 8:30.
I know, I'm sorry.
And I really appreciate the passion that you have for this. And I would think I would go on the record saying I agree 100% with everything you said. I think the fact that you found out there's precedent in national cemeteries to not fly anything but one flag, that should go a long way. I think the aspect of offering up a marker or some monument money or whatever to the town to help appease this would go a long way. However, I think the bottom line is, and this is indicated by the select board's decision to not include us. The bottom line is this is not in our purview. We don't get to solve it. It's bumped it upstairs. And so despite how we feel, despite whether Wynot or any of the veterans, carry the day on it or not, it's not going to be able to be up to us. So I think it'd be wonderful to put the offer on the table as something for the select board to consider. Here's our contribution to resolve this issue. We happen to believe, and we could take a vote if you want to, that the American flag is really all that's appropriate in this part. I love your part about reuniting the soldiers with their families and all that is wonderful. But I don't think it's going to carry because we don't get to decide. And my business experience has always been, you got to drop back and ask yourself, do we get to weigh in on this in a tangible way, or are we just recommenders? And I think, unfortunately, based on that last thing, we're recommenders. And I don't know that, based on what I saw in the town meeting, that it came out any differently. So therefore, my suggestion is we have to just let it go. It will be what the town, select board decides, unless they get influenced some other way that's got more clout than us. But I don't think we get to. We have a dog in the hunt, but I don't think it's a very big dog, and I don't think the dog is going to make a difference.
Well, yeah, very clearly. I mean, the select board are going to be the deciders in this. However, I would say that the VSOs are going to be. This is part that kind of frustrated me a little bit in that vote last month, is that I didn't expect the select board to turn to us and ask and then automatically do exactly what we say. What I expected was that we would be one voice in a multifaceted conversation that would certainly include the views of the veterans and whatever other constituency the select board felt was appropriate to hear from. So that's all. I will say that after town meeting, actually, Chelsea Malinowski sort of came up to me as we were walking out of the hall, and she was very, very, very nice and said, "Oh, gee, I didn't want you to think that like I was against, I just, it happened so quick, and you weren't there, and I didn't know. And I said, well, I wasn't there because I had a meeting with my crew that night, and so it was a very kind of cordial just exchange of, I think the point of that is that it's an ongoing conversation. And I think I'm in favor personally of just trying to make sure that we have a voice in this, and that it's a reasoned and rational one, and that what I would be in favor of expressing ourselves as people who are looking to help solve the problem. It would be nice. I know, Kate, you have some thoughts on the question of our sort of agency here, because I do agree it's frustrating. It seems to me that the old burial ground is a really natural place for the Historical Commission to actually have a little authority. And Jim is absolutely right that right now we don't have any other than, advisory. So.
Right. So that's what Jim, you said exactly what my concern is just that the select board has made it clear a while back that the burial ground is just not in our purview. So I would have appreciated being asked to opine, to offer our feedback ahead of town meeting, but that didn't happen. So I feel like it's just out of our, we're not a decision maker here, and so I feel like it's a little bit out of our purview at this point.
I will say that I had a conversation with our town clerk this afternoon, because I'd heard him say at town meeting that, opine, I suppose, that the possibility of some of the sort of advisory articles that come forward might be better served by being on the ballot as a vote. And I was curious to know from Mr. Haggerty how that would work. And we had a brief, interesting conversation about that. And he said to me that he's going to look into it for me, because it just to provide me with the information. So I understand, because he said, this is a tricky one, and I want to make sure I give you the right information. So he's going to look into that aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
Frankly, I wouldn't mind seeing this go to a ballot question, because then, hey, this is democracy, right? Everybody lays their argument out, and instead of 130, I think I'd heard in some quarter that this was the lowest attended town meeting like ever, like 130 people in the room. Look,
I think it was like 147 to about 164 people.
Right. Okay, so there you go. But maybe put it on the ballot, and then whoever comes out for the election. And listen, if the town votes 50.1% to keep those flags, well, that's democracy, and everybody's got to live with it, and we get the town that we get, So that's one angle that I'm interested in finding out about. And our clerk is really wonderful about getting information when it's asked for. So I'm confident that I'll get something from him on that. But in the meantime, well, Grant and Annie, do you want to weigh in on this? Just wondered like where you're at, and if you think, it's a problem, right? Because can I just say one other thing is that, it to some degree, I have no desire, and partly because some of the past history before I even came on the commission of sort of antagonizing these groups, but I actually think it's an opportunity, to show them that just because we, for instance, and I don't know, we haven't taken a vote on this. Maybe some of you support keeping the flags there, fine. My personal position is I think they should go. I think they should go for constitutional and reasons of law having to do with the recent Supreme Court decision. I think they should go for reasons of history. even though I'm not willing to enter into that debate, or to put it another way, I accept the veterans saying, I don't care, they're not authentic. They're authentic to the time, and that's enough for me. Well, how do you argue with that position? You can't, you know? And I have no desire to run around calling those folks, you know, bad people because they believe in those flags. Quite the contrary. Again, at the same time, though, those people who say they're disturbed by them, they have good grounds and good logic behind their arguments. And I accept those folks as well. So again, I'm just trying to broker what I think is the most sensible solution, is to put one flag on the one flagpole and call it a day, and realize that that's respectful treatment according to the national cemeteries. So that, and I'm willing to put some capital on the line, and I'm willing to take some grief, quite frankly, because I believe in the principle here, and I believe that it's the right thing, you know, for the town, and to solve an intractable problem that isn't going away, by the way. I think, and I know for a fact that, you know, folks in the select board understand that the issue did not end at town meeting. It's going to continue, just because of the legal end of it. So we've got to find a way out. And I thought to offer this kind of olive branch in the form of some sort of trying to find a way to commemorate those graves might be extremely helpful. But Annie.
Yeah, so I hear what Kate and Jim are saying about it not really being in our purview. And I understand that and agree with that. But I do think that, Kevin, to your point, it would be very lovely and would be a nice gesture, you know, on behalf of the Historical Commission, you know, to offer to, you know, dedicate the tree or do some sort of, you know, signage or whatnot to commemorate, you know, to commemorate those graves. So I guess I'm kind of in the middle. You know, I, in terms of like, you know, what flags are there, given all of the options, I like the idea of one flag. I do personally, I see that, you know, the ones that are there are problematic. There's some of the ones there, but I also don't think it's the right solution to replace them with something else. You know, in terms of, you know, finding other flags to put up in their stead. So I'm in favor of the one flag. And even though it's not in our purview, you know, I think that we're allowed to opine on things, and it would be a lovely gesture, you know, if we wanted to suggest some sort of commemorative, you know, act in the old burial ground.
Grant.
Sorry.
Right, you're muted. There you go.
Yeah, I agree with Annie that I think our voice as a commission matters, and I think that you know, we're allowed to weigh in on things, and if they don't want to listen to us, that's perfectly within their, you know, that's their right not to care what we say. But I think that this is a matter that's relevant to us, and you know, I think, you know, taking a position is something that we would be able to do. I agree with much of what has been said. For legal reasons, don't think that we should have those flags flying there, and agree with the one flag solution. In terms of the solution that you proposed, Kevin, I just, you know, it's interesting, and I hadn't thought about that. I'm not really sure if that would bring things to a resolution personally. I mean, let's just say you reach out to the veterans groups, you reach out to the select board, you say, you know, hey, we'd love to, you know, create this stone with 25 names on it. You know, would you be essentially dangling that as a condition of them taking down the flags? Or, you know, would you just have that be instituted and then come back and say, hey, we have this rock with these names, we don't need the flags? Or, is it a quid pro quo, or how exactly would that work? I'm just not sure I see how I think it's a fine idea in order to do that on our own, but I don't see how it's necessarily related to the flags, disappearing from the.
Well, yeah, to be clear about that, the select board has the power to order those flags taken down tomorrow, right? It's an executive decision that rests with the select board. So all I'm saying is that if the select board wished, they could couple that hard decision. And one of the things I mean, it's easy in a way for me, as chair of historical, who doesn't have the authority to take the flags down, but can opine all he wants, to run around, making comments. So I understand that it's an extremely difficult position for the select board. However, I think they have to take a stand. And what I'm trying to say is, if the select board, by majority vote, does what I think is the right thing as a gesture toward sort of good feeling and healing and showing the veterans that the decision to do that is not an anti-veteran decision. It is a pro-unity decision. The historical commission could do our part to bring people together by, kicking in some of this money that was granted to us, kicking it back, if the select board would allow it, toward, commemorating, even as we take down these divisive flags, commemorating the veterans in a permanent and meaningful way. And I just thought, as a group here, as a commission, that it would make it clear, that this is not an anti-vet move. This is a pro-unity move. So no, one is not exactly tied. It's not a quid pro quo. We give you a monument, you get rid of your flags. But the thought was spurred for me, A, by Sally's research that shows that there are a whole bunch of unmarked veterans' graves. B, this problem we're having a little bit with some of these remaining small markers, and that we've already removed one from our thing, so we could do it. And C, by the thought that, it's when you ask somebody to give something up, right, that they really care about, it's just a nice thing, to be able to say, well, we'd like to actually give you something that we think might be maybe not exactly what you know what I mean, like what you wanted, but something that would mean something to you, and that would show that we're trying our damnedest to bring people together and not drive people apart. So and I think that's what a historical commission should do. I think that's what all town boards and committees should do, to the degree, you can't make everybody happy all the time. I do have my suspicion that nothing is going to get the veterans to yield on that. But if the select board ultimately takes the hard decision to do what I think is the right thing, all I'm saying is, personally, I stand ready to cast my vote toward us putting our money where our mouth is and trying to give something back.
And I think, I think that, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Grant. Do you want me to let you go?
No, you can go. Yeah.
I'm sorry about that. I think Jim and I are on the same page as all of you as well. I think that we're just both saying, because he and I were on the commission together when this did come up, I think it's more that he and I agree that our hands are just tied in a different way. We have opined, we would be willing to opine if we were asked. It's just that we were very, very clearly told that that is not within our purview, because we did offer at one point even to try to take care of some of the trees that needed some work and care. I think it's more that. I
Well,
think that
yeah.
your argument at town meeting, Kevin, just made massive sense to all of us too, that you fly a single flag, you do that. I certainly love all of your ideas. Neither of us disagree with any of that. I feel more that it's that our hands are tied, that this is not in our authority at all. Unfortunately, it doesn't make sense to me. It's historic burial ground, but.
Well, one thing I'd like to say about that is that I would like to demonstrate, and you know, I mean, Sam is, you know, among the attendees. I mean, I'd like to demonstrate to the select board that this is a group that can be trusted in these matters. You know,
Sure.
you say, well, we don't have authority right now. Well, I'd like to go to them and say, give us some.
Sure,
Give us
I don't
some.
disagree with that. I think
You know?
it makes sense to us, but
And you give us some, and we'll do right. And if you think we don't do right, take it back away from us. You know,
Just one thing, I would argue that even though we might have physical, authority over the physical space of the burial ground in terms of managing the land, or putting up what we want there, putting up signs or something like that, it is, we're allowed to think about it.
oh,
And
sure.
we're allowed to speak
And I
about it.
and
And if we so choose, we can tell the select board what we think about it. We can write a
Sure.
letter or something like that. If that's what we
Absolutely.
like.
well, and
We have done that.
I
Agreed.
think we have a kind of moral imperative, frankly, to speak out and to speak up, because I really do think that we're on a bad, especially after Shirtliff, I think we're on a bad road here, that they're going to have to, and what we can do, I think, and I know Jim's got to go shortly, so we're going to fall off down to 4, but we can leave this an open question and come back to it and see what kind of action, if any, the select board takes over the next month. I'll put it back on the agenda for November.
I think that's a good idea.
I think that the independent parties who are involved in this are frankly going to keep pressing, including the group that's come forward with a proposal to plant their own flags up there. So, this is going to keep percolating. And all I want to signal right now, I suppose, is that we're not the enemies of the veterans. I consider myself a friend. I want to prove it. I'm willing to put my money where my mouth is. And I want to make clear to the select board that we're not looking, again, to win an argument, but we're looking to sort of solve a very divisive problem in the town in a way that will let everyone sleep at night and feel good about the space. Because it's one of the most, it is arguably the most important public space in Southborough. And so I think, it grieves me, frankly, to go into the OBG and see piles of tree limbs and broken branches and cracked stones and these flags that, to my eye, never seem to be even straight. And this whole business of they appear in the spring magically, they disappear in the fall. Now we know it's because it's been out in public record. It's who puts them up and who takes them down. And those folks, one thing I said at the select board meeting the other night is, there are certain folks in town, and it came out at town meeting that, Bonnie Faniff is one of them, who really very lovingly sort of tend to those grave flags. And I know Mr. Wynot goes down, he lowers the flag to half-mast, half-staff at like the Veterans Memorial for different things. And, and they place the flags in the flag poles or the utility poles up and down Main Street, take them down in the fall, put them up in the spring. And that's a real sort of service that I think needs to be respected and honored. But, you also, as I said the other night again, that you have to be willing sometimes to tell your friends that you think they're wrong, and I think they're wrong about these battle flags. And so, but let us move on. We'll leave it an open question. We'll see if the select board takes any action. And we'll come back to it because I think we have to. So is that a fair place to leave it? Great. All right. Thank you. Jim, if you have to.
I do have to go,
Oh.
guys. Good to see you. Sorry, it's a short night for me, but carry on.
All
Thanks,
right. Well, thank you, Jim. We will carry on because we still have a quorum, and I'm going to try to race through all this stuff now. The first one on chair's report is the biggest one. It's the St. Mark's Triangle Archaeological Investigation Developments. And there are a few. Again, this was another thing at town meeting. Unfortunately, I think because of time reasons, Article 13 was indefinitely postponed. That was an initiative focused on St. Mark's Triangle. The select board in their meeting last week, decided after getting advice from the DPW head that they could, without great financial risk or penalty, actually postpone work on the triangle until the spring. There was this sort of urgency to try to get moving before the weather closed in. And it had to do with the contractor and, everything, the price of asphalt. So all kinds of factors. But finally, being advised by Ms. Galligan that they could sort of shuffle things around a little bit and actually sort of extend it to the spring. And I did speak on this matter as well, urging the select board to sort of embrace the DPW head's recommendation, or the option that she had presented to them to hold off to the spring to continue work. And so they voted to wait, which this is good news given some of the recent developments. As you know, subsequent to the about 4 or 5 days that Greg Walworth spent around Labor Day, right before and right after, on the site, first digging test pits and then doing scraping with an excavator. They found some stuff. They didn't find any graves, but they did find and mark 3 particular spots of interest, 2 which they consider sort of foundation remains. So they had 3 what they called red flag areas, an area near the pollinator garden behind the library, an area just north of the stone wall in the actual parcel that's designated to be a park. That was a second foundation. And a third area, which was a debris field, which is currently marked by a whole bunch of a circle of little flags. And so they found a fair number of artifacts. And as I think I previously said, while the dig was going on, I went down and showed Greg the artifacts that Dan Blanchard had simply picked up. And he was quite interested in those. And so I believe he was finding more of that kind of stuff, as well as the evidence of foundations. So Greg continued to ask me periodically for information. And throughout the process, I've been trying to, deliver to the best of my ability. And frequently this involved me, digging around on my own, and occasionally reaching out to folks at the Historical Society, specifically Sally Waters, who was really, really helpful to me and was, oh gosh, digging around in the Pilgrim Church, their archives, and asking Michael Wyson to look into a couple things that he would, dig around the Historical Society's archives, just to answer Greg Walworth's questions, because he continued to seem to have a sort of a persistent flow of questions. And, by request, Rob Kuklovich, the CFO of St. Mark's, has been sort of spearheading or been the liaison between the school and me and Greg and sort of superintending all that stuff, was CC'd on these communications. And Greg would ask a question, and then I would go and try to find the answer and give it to him. And the point of this was that he, was supposed to be preparing a report for the MHC. And as I indicated, Greg's read on the situation was, well, I didn't find any graves. There are these debris fields and there are these foundations. He didn't feel that warranted any further investigation. But he said, I have to run all this by Mass Historical. They may decide otherwise. And that's sort of where we were, right? So recently, early in October, Greg sent me a message asking yet again about, they were dealing with two house structures. I'm reading his email now, so I'm sorry I'm looking off camera, but they were dealing with two house structures that related to the late 19th and early 20th century school use of the property. But he wasn't sure beyond that. And so I went yet again digging, and I got some help from the Southborough Historical Society, and specifically Michael Wyson, because I wanted to go down and look at, they had some assessor's records of the period. And so I asked to come down, and Michael met me at the museum, and we looked through some of these assessor records, and we looked again at some maps, and we're trying to sort of piece things together. And finally, it occurred to Michael that he had a book, it was still in shrink wrap because no one had ever looked at it over there, called The Echo of Their Voices, 150 Years of St. Mark's School, written by none other than Richard E. Noble, Nick Noble, the same guy that wrote Fences of Stone, the official town history. And it's this massive book, humongous, thick, fat, big thing. And Michael handed it to me and said, have at it. And I did. And I came upon something very, very interesting, which I, in a fairly lengthy email to Greg Walwer, conveyed to him. And I want to share it with you so you have an understanding what's going on here. I said that, the two locations that Greg had previously identified, and I'd walked the grounds with him when he was on site, and I had already seen one of them. It was clearly visible. And he identified the other one. I said, there's no corresponding structure shown in the 1854 town map. However, the 1870 map shows two structures seemingly in the precise positions that Greg had identified. One near the present-day Pollinator Garden, the other to the north of the OBG stone wall in the proposed park area. An 1898 map online at the Historical Society website shows those structures gone by that time. However, another 1898 map that I looked at the Historical Society shows the southernmost structure, like closest to the library, still in existence. And I'm reading my own email here. I said, both I believe would certainly have been gone by 1898 when the Burnett family made their initial donation of land for the purposes of providing a site for the new town library building. But that the interesting part of this story came in the echo of their voices. Again, this is the Nick Noble History of St. Mark's, published in 1915. That describing work done at St. Mark's during the 1898-99 school year, Noble writes, quote, the St. Mark's steward, who at that time was a man named Mr. Lane, is describing that they were doing some construction projects on the school at that time, right? Which is, of course, at the corner of Marlborough Road and Main Street on the east side, that's like the St. Mark's Meadow area, like where we have the Town Day. I always call it the wrong thing. Town Day, right? Help me.
Heritage Day.
Heritage Day. I do it all the time. Heritage Day, that space, that's where the school buildings were, right? So they're doing work there. It says, Mr. Lane, I'm quoting now, supervised these projects, but most of the work was done by William Washington and his son, Edwin, Southborough's first free Black resident. Washington came to Massachusetts with his family from upstate New York. And further reading indicate that he had actually a Native American wife. The Washingtons, here's the interesting part, moved into a house at the corner of Main Street and Marlborough Road, owned by Joseph Burnett, and William started working for Burnett's Deerfoot Farm. Interesting, because the corner where the school is not where the house would have been, but where we're talking about in Greg Walworth's field of area, that would have been the place for the house. When Lane, who was sexton, also sexton of St. Mark's Church, as well as the steward of the school, died in January of 1899, so just about a year later, William Washington, this would be Southborough's first free Black resident, succeeded him both as steward of the school and sexton of the church. When later in 1899, Washington, as the quote is, was hailed as a hero for battling a fire at the school that left him unconscious. There's a wonderful story in this book about they had gas in the school at that time, and he was making his night rounds with a lantern. And he opens up like the basement, like bulkhead door to one of the school buildings and starts to enter, and the thing blows up. And he was seriously injured. And this story goes in the St. Mark's history that he evacuated all the students without anyone being injured. But that he, by the end of this ordeal, ended up unconscious. And they had a big ceremony and like celebration at St. Mark's, hailing him as the sort of savior of the school over this fire. So it's a fascinating story. During the school year of 1903-1904, Edwin Washington, that's the son, replaced his then ailing father, William, as head steward at St. Mark's. He also moved his family to a since demolished home over on School Street. Now, this is where the timing is very interesting, because what I said to Greg was what I would theorize based on this information is that the more southerly structure was the house, described as owned by Joseph Burnett and occupied by Southborough's first free Black resident, Mr. William Washington, and likely his son as well. The more northerly structure may well have been a barn or workshop. The structures would have been built after 1848, but certainly definitively by 1870. The house surely existed into the first decade of the 20th century, likely torn down after 1904, while the other structure, again, perhaps a support building or barn, was based on the maps, possibly gone by 1898. The details of that are yet to be ironed out, and I'm still looking to try to pin down some of this stuff quite certainly. Like I know that, for instance, William Washington ended up dying in Everett, of all places. I sent this to Greg. I said, this is the best I got. It's really interesting. And this information comports with what you've located. His reply was, he had some different information from assessor's records. And he indicated, for instance, that an assessor record he was looking at it from 1911 showed that Fay School rather than St. Mark's owned the parcel. And I note that that actually makes sense in that, of course, Fay being founded by Eliza Burnett Fay and Harriet Burnett, there may be some crossover in terms of it's listed here as Burnett, here is Fay property, it's passed down. So that some of that stuff needs to be cleared up, but I find it a very intriguing story. Is it a difference maker? I don't know. I hope that Greg has included that in his report to MHC, and I'm not clear whether at the time he's asking these questions, that is to prepare the initial report or to respond to queries from Mass Historical. And, we've been in a very tough position in this one from the beginning, because similar to this bit with the old burial ground, it's another place where we had no authority, right? The property is owned by St. Mark's. We had to fight for many, many, many months to finally get St. Mark's, bless their hearts and thank you very much, to agree wonderfully to finally do the dig. But we're not the employers of Greg Walwer, right? We're not his boss. We're not paying the bill. We don't own the property. And so I've had to walk a very difficult tightrope, for the better part of a year now. And I've set myself up to try to be a conduit of information in a sort of objective and even-handed way. I've tried very hard to be very forthcoming and fair-minded when dealing with the school, and as comprehensive as I can be when conveying what I know to town officials and to the public. But we've been in a very difficult position because we don't have any enforcement power in any of this. And so I've often had to try to get and pass along information in as diplomatic a way as I possibly can. And again, as everybody knows, right, our number one and really sole focus in this was to make sure that a park or a parking lot or a road or whatever wasn't constructed on top of Native American graves. And, my position has been, I think we've done a pretty good job in that. But here's the part I really need to clarify tonight. A letter was received apparently at the townhouse by the town manager, and it was shared with the select board and with me, and with the chair of advisory, from an attorney who's raised objections apparently on behalf of client or clients in Southborough over the adequacy and scope of the dig. And, I want to go back and say, just remind everybody that Greg was very clear when he came on our call this summer and explained what was going to happen. And he was quite distinct about saying, listen, let's be clear, this is a functional dig, I believe was the term he used, and not an academic one. And it's not going to, it's meant to look for possible grave sites. It's not going to comb the area for every last possible artifact. And furthermore, remember, he was very clear about saying in areas that are not slated based on the VHB plans he was looking at, are not slated for development, I'm not looking. So for instance, there's that scrim of trees to the north of the stone wall, the OBG, and sort of toward the east, or I'm sorry, toward the west, I should say, north and west, that, that scrim of trees that was after the ground was bulldozed, there was a stand of trees left. He's like, there may be graves in there, but I'm not looking there because that's not where there's going to be a pathway or a walkway or, anything. So there may be graves outside the walls that aren't found. And, I wasn't thrilled by that by any means, but I felt that we had fought so hard to get anything done that, I could live with it. That said, now we're talking about possibly a very important story in the history of Southborough. We're talking about foundations. We're talking about debris fields. We're also talking about the fact that the town has taken the decision not to rush this, to get it right. It involves a lot of things that are none of our business, like going back to town meeting to try to get voters to actually approve a land swap. And I don't know what else is going to come in the form of other warrant articles brought by citizens. But there is now time. And I don't know how much water this letter from this attorney is going to draw with MHC. The letter was sent CC'd to Mr. Purple, but it was addressed to let me see, MHC officials, including Brona Simon, the head of the MHC, and the state archaeologist, to Jim Peters, who's the executive director of the Commission on Indian Affairs, an anthropologist and member of the Nipmuc tribe of Massachusetts, and also CC Mass DOT. So there's a lot of players looking at this material right now. It's a long, fairly long letter with a lot of supporting documents. It only came under my field of view yesterday. So it needs further study. My understanding is that town council is looking into the matter, and we'll see where it goes from there. But what I'm hoping is, again, my stance on this is that none of us are archaeologists, right? And that we are reliant on the professionals at the state to take the information that Greg brings to them and to evaluate it comprehensively and to make whatever recommendation they feel like they need to make. One thing I will say again publicly is that I have the highest regard possible for Greg Walwer, for his reputation, for his professionalism, for his forthcomingness. He has been, and like I said, you know, I heard people saying, even when the dig was going on, well, he's not going far enough. He's not doing enough. He's not digging enough places. And it caused a certain kind of soul searching in me. You know, am I pushing hard enough for this? But ultimately, again, I have to defer to the professional expertise of Mass Historical. I know they're going to look at this material very closely. And I said to some people that approached me privately to sort of complain about, they didn't think Mr. Walwer was doing enough. I said, you realize that he ended up digging in the extreme northern point of the parcel, like right up near the existing road in what's slated to be this parking lot for St. Mark's. And that wasn't in the original scope of work at all. And when I asked Greg, well, why are you digging there? He said, because that's where the evidence took me. In other words, he, you know, expanded the original scope of what he even said he was going to do or what he was mandated to do, because I guess, you know, with the blessing of, or at least the sufferance or forbearance of the folks at St. Mark's, he said, this is where the evidence is pointing me. So I need to dig here. And so he did. And I thought that was a real, for me, an important marker of his independence. That said, with the new information about, you know, other possible, the sort of historical significance of this, I don't know if MHC will come back and ask for more. But the good news, maybe not financially, but if they did, that the town has taken the decision to wait until the spring to push forward, you know, and meanwhile, the working group of which Grant and I are members are going to continue to try to, you know, get somewhere in this. But I'd like a more definitive answer on this question of William Washington, because quite frankly, it's going to influence my vision, if there is ever a park there, what it might be. But the point of this all is that there's so many moving parts at this point, and I just wanted to, again, because apparently there's some people out there sort of barking about the dig. I just wanted, again, I just wanted to say that, gosh, we've been in a tough position, you know, to try to get anything done. I think I think the commission's done a pretty good job. And, you know, the goal is to be as transparent as possible. I'm trying to say everything I know and everything I feel like I can say without being irresponsible about it. There are people complaining. Those complaints are going to be dealt with, but ultimately addressed. And by the way, I think that those voices that emerge and that write letters and send and sort of bark about things, I think that's actually a really important part of the process. And because I think it keeps us all on our toes, you know, because, you know, God forbid, I mean, I don't want to make a mistake in this, you know, I don't want to feel like I left a stone unturned. So I'm really trying to get as much information as possible. And hopefully we'll get some good, solid professional advice from MHC. And they'll tell us what to do. Grant, have at it.
Yeah, just thought I'd raise my hand and jump in if that's okay. Yeah, so as a member of the, I don't know if I have to say the entire title here, but I will. St. Mark's Street Park Working Group, which is always a mouthful. Yeah, I found this all very interesting. Thanks, Kevin. I have a few questions. So in terms of the information that you found about William and Edwin Washington, did you share that with that with Greg, who then is going to share it with Mass Historical, or do you share it directly with Mass Historical, or does Mass?
Yeah, that's my understanding. That, you know, he's seeking this because, and he's been so forthcoming and so straight up with me and so transparent that I don't think he's going to take information like this and sit on it. You know, that said, once we get some guidance from town council about sort of how to proceed, I would like to, you know, reach out again to Mass Historical and just make sure that we've dotted all our, you know, I don't think I'm overstepping to, for instance, to reach out to the what I regard as kind of the mothership on matters historical, and just to confirm that they've received all the information and that they can evaluate it, because now they have a letter from some attorney offering, you know, her take on it. So I think they should be hearing from us. But I'm gonna, I would think that would happen in fairly short order, because I certainly don't want to sit on it too long, but
Okay.
I also want to sort of follow, kind of be respectful of the procedural channels. So yeah.
Awesome. And then my other question, I hadn't heard of that letter that you received, or I guess what was it Mark Purple who received it? But would it be possible to receive or for the commission members to receive?
I believe, my understanding is that the select board is going to be taking the matter up. So I would expect when they next meet, or shortly, it will kind of come into public domain, so to speak. It's part of their, I want to get over my skis on this, because like I said, I haven't had the chance, to really thoroughly go through the whole thing. It just came to me yesterday. So Kate, do you have anything on this, or we're good? I said it was going to be fast. This was the longest one. The other ones really are fast. All right, I'll go on.
I don't have any questions or anything to add.
Okay. Doc Stonehouse. This is happier, in a way, happier news. I talked to Jim Shea again the other day, chair of their Fay Schools Board of Trustees. And once again, I couldn't love the guy more. He couldn't be more of a pleasure to deal with. He actually spotted our agenda and noted that I had an update scheduled and called me and said, let me update you. What a pleasure. And here's the quick update. They are moving forward. They have formally signed a contract with Richard Curl, C-U-R-L, an architect out of Melrose, who actually sits on a historical commission in Melrose. He was out at the building yesterday, apparently, and today, via email, Jim sort of formally introduced Mr. Curl to me and me to him. And we had a brief exchange. I sent him a whole bunch of information, including those photos we had gotten from Sally, which are so interesting, that show the Greek Revival original house on the west end of the lot. And then the original had been freestanding sort of workshop, and then it became the town barber shop on the east end. Remember that? And the Doc Stone sort of connected it with that little L sometime after 1947 when he bought the building. So it's a really fascinating thing. And actually in one of those photos, you can see the house that did exist behind the workshop on Middle Road that Doc Stone had torn down when he bought the property. And that's the area that Dan Blanchard of Fay School has been doing an archaeological dig with his students, actually, over recent months, and finding all kinds of artifacts. I've been over there, and Dan has shown me some of the stuff that he's found. So there's all kinds of stuff cooking there. And so I sent Mr. Curl, who's a very impressive architect. You can look him up and see his stuff. I sent him as much as I had that I thought would be helpful, even down to Doc Stone's obituary from the Morris Funeral Home, which I think I read on an earlier call. Also on the team is, as I mentioned, I think before, Jean Pelletier, who's an attorney involved in preservation matters. She did a lot of work on the Air Mansion on Commonwealth Avenue in Boston. So she's a South End attorney that deals in preservation issues and very good at, apparently, at grant writing and grant making. They also have their own facilities committee involved, and further that they've engaged a firm called Building Conservation Associates, BCA. I believe they're out of Newton, and they're going to be involved in consulting and advising on how to proceed. He said they're still putting together the finances of this. This is the difficult part of it. And he's, again, understandably unwilling to formally commit to withdrawing the demolition delay application, which expires January 12th, 2023, until they have the money nailed down. And he indicated that would be about 45 to 60 days. So we still got a way to go on this. But I cannot tell you how excited I am and how strongly I feel that we are in sight of a big, big, big win for the town. Like saving this building is going to be massive. And I just don't, I mean, you gotta, Jim, what a sweetheart he is. And I gotta tell you, it's just such a pleasure to deal with. He's been, forthright, forthcoming, accessible, and I believe 100% committed, right? Even a surefire sort of derby favorite, ahead by 20 lengths, sometimes stumbles, 50 feet from the finish line and doesn't win the race. But I think our money is on the right pony here. And I think I'm optimistic. So I'll leave it at that. The 84 Main Street thing, that's the Burnett Mansion. Nothing going on there yet. I decided, because of all the things we had going on, even before the revised agenda, that ought to wait. And so I'm going to try to get Mr. Deli Priscoli in November or December if he's available. And also, Grant has acquired a number of documents pursuant to the preservation restriction, but we still got one that we've got to get. And so that's in my hands and I got to work on it. And hopefully we'll make some progress. The scenic roads bylaw was indefinitely postponed at town meeting. I think this was a decision taken after the tree bylaw failed to pass. And so I've reached out and connected with Marty Houlihan, and I plan to talk to her after Halloween. Again, my position on this was that because the planning board had decided to use it as an administrative function, and without going into a sort of definition or an attempt to adjudicate what a scenic a road is or is not, that there wasn't a particular role for us to play in this. However, I do want to talk to Marnie after Thanksgiving. I don't know if the failure of the tree bylaw is going to prompt planning to attempt to bring it again in the spring, and if there'll be amendments to the tree bylaw, and if consequently there may be amendments or changes to the scenic roads bylaw. I don't know. So I'm leaving it an open question. I love talking to those folks, and I look forward to doing so again. Item E on this chair's report, and final, you'll be happy to know, is that I got an email a day or two ago from Bill Davis, who is a member of the golf course committee. I just wanted to put to you if you could help me out on this. And what he was asking was that they apparently plan to upgrade the signage at town golf course, and they're looking for one. He says they want to commission what he calls a biggish one that would stand outside the clubhouse, and which would feature a recreation of a historic photo of the course. Among the course's best features are its legacy and unspoiled layout, and I want to emphasize them. So the ask is, does the commission have any old photos of the course that might be candidates for our sign? If so, whom should I contact about taking a look at them? And of course, we don't have anything. So I replied to Bill Davis and said, in my view, your best bet is the Historical Society. And I gave him Michael Wyson's email and Sally Waters' email. And I just wanted to ask if you knew anything that I don't, which is quite possible, that there might, like, I don't know if Kate, if you knew something, that there was some place with their golf course photos other than the society.
No, I haven't seen any, and I haven't seen any, even when it came up when they were building public safety. I don't remember seeing any. So as happens with all this stuff, the Historical Society is absolutely the best resource.
I wonder too, I was reading some stuff, and at this point I'm so addled because I'm always reading, I'm trying to research stuff that I don't know where I read this, but there was something about, who it was that actually donated the property for the golf course.
Mm-hmm.
That information is somewhere, and I wonder if there's an early, I'll have to look that up again,
Yeah.
but I just wanted to check with you guys if I was missing anything or being stupid about it. And
No, I haven't seen any pictures that I can recall right now, that, and certainly none that we have. If anything, like I said, if anything, they'd be with the Historical Society. I haven't seen any at the townhouse. We haven't run into any that I know of. So they are probably the best resource. That's
Okay.
Sally. She's pretty fantastic.
that's what I thought. It's Sally, Michael, they got,
Yeah, they'll know. Patty, yeah, they'll know. They've been going through all those photos too, so.
good. Okay, well, I hope it works out.
One thing I would note, Kevin, I think I mentioned it in my presentation earlier. There's this website called Digital Commonwealth.
So yeah, and I put it in the minutes, yeah.
Like
Yeah, good.
tens
Well,
of thousands of photos across Massachusetts, and so you can filter by town and keyword and stuff. So I can do a
yeah, I'll send that to Bill. I actually spent some time when you sent that to me looking at those. So it's fascinating. Great. Well, so now we're at approved meeting minutes of September 20th.
Grant, I got your latest edition. Thank you for noticing that. So I appreciate that.
Would have been a long hike.
I know, right? So yeah, thank you for noticing that. Sometimes I get delirious. Those details.
So
Other than a change from an AM to a PM, you guys have seen the latest version.
great. So, yeah, I've got my little nicks were in there and Jim's looked it over. And Annie, do you have any,
Nope, it looks good to me. So I think I'm supposed to make this motion, right? So I, give me 1 second. So I move that we approve the meeting minutes from September 20th, 2022.
Grant, you'll have to second it this time.
I will second.
excellent, motion made and seconded, roll call vote, Miller, yes.
Battles, yes.
Bath, yes.
Farrington, yes.
All right, 4-0, minutes approved, thank you. We also need to schedule future meetings, and because we don't have any scheduled after now. I don't know what you folks are thinking, and I don't know if circumstances will, prompt me to call anything sooner. I hope not. However, 4 weeks from now brings us to the 22nd, which is the week of Thanksgiving, which I don't know if that's convenient to people. The other thing is I would be very much interested. I think I'd expressed this before, of going back to Thursdays. I don't know, Jim had to leave early tonight, even though it's a Tuesday. So I don't know if it affects, if he'd be amenable. What do the rest of you folks feel about Thursday?
Fine for me.
For me, Thursdays are much better. I occasionally have other commitments on Tuesdays, and Thursdays I don't. Sometimes we have CPC, but we seem to be able to, alternate well enough that like knowing that Thursday is my, town meeting day is convenient for me. But I can make Tuesday happen as well if need be.
If we went back to Thursday, it could be like the 17th, the week before, or December 1st, which is the week after Thanksgiving. Or I don't know, is there strong feeling about this?
I think the 17th works for me.
I think it does for me as well.
Yeah, because then that would get us in like a fairly early December meeting, like before you get into like, no one wants to do it, probably past the 18th or something like that. So, so how about November 17th? That's a Thursday at 7 p.m. And the other thing about running these meetings a little bit quicker is that I hope there's less to be said, tonight, again, it turns out to be a long one because I felt it's so important to like be clear about the flags and be clear about this archaeological dig. They're both such sensitive subjects, and you just don't want to be any less than comprehensive. So 17th at 7.
Yeah, works for me.
Great.
No problem.
Kevin, that works for me. I think one thing I would know is that the working group does meet at Thursdays at 7.
Yeah.
We used to have a regular schedule going, and now, of course, with town meeting and everything, it's kind of been
Right.
and I don't think we have anything set in stone right now. So I think we can work around that.
Yeah. Well, we'll try that, and then we'll have to hold out for maybe in November the 10th for the working group. All right. Thank you. Where am I now? Any other business that may legally come before thankfully, there's nothing.
May I just say a few quick words about the budget? Do you think that's appropriate here?
Oh, yeah. And actually, even rolling back, Kate, did you, because there was this question, Grant had been so great about, noting that, and I think we've generally done an extremely good job by the clerk's office in terms of timely posting minutes and getting them approved, and we're all up to date, and I feel like we should all get the gold star from the clerk's office. But Grant had discovered, I think a couple of things where we had referenced a supporting document and they were listed in the meeting minutes. And then in one case, I know I just forgot to send it in. No one's asked for it, but I'm glad Grant caught it. Well, you sent it in and it gets added so that there's never any.
Yeah.
I don't
There's
want
only one that, and it's not an issue. So one set I already modified. I forget which set it is, Grant. The August 23rd, the documents just weren't posted, so I added them. They're all posted. They're all up there. I think it was the July one, Grant, that we should have added the scenic roads bylaw presentation, I believe it was.
Right.
All I'm gonna do is, I already did, I typed it into the minutes, so I'll just post a new version of the minutes. We don't need to vote on that. All it is a document used. It just doesn't change the meaning of the minutes, anything like that. And then I'll add that. That's not a problem. So just when I send the drafts, please feel free, really, really, really feel free to check my work, especially when I do list the documents, because again, I just might not think of something that should be added. So if we've discussed it, shared it, any of that stuff, take a look at it with the draft, and then I'll make sure that that I post them. So, and it's not a big deal if for some reason we forget to add a post. It's easy to update those postings. So,
and I'm delighted to have another set of eyes on that, because sometimes I try to, as soon as the minutes are approved, I tend to want to send them the very next day and get it up right away. And then, sometimes I'm busy and I just forget there was a supporting document I should have included. So I'm happy to have somebody watching all this.
Absolutely. And it's not a big deal. And you can always send that stuff directly to me. So I don't like to post the minutes because I've written them and I don't want to date time stamp them myself. But if I just need to do something administrative, like attach a few documents, go ahead and send that to me. That's not a problem in the slightest, because I want to make sure that info's up there too.
And I will just note for the record that it's not that I have a tremendous memory and remembered every single document, but that YouTube is a very, very wonderful tool, and I just happen to, oh yes,
no, it's great. It's like
PowerPoint and stuff like that. So yeah.
No, I think it's great, and and like when I type these two, just like anything, I start to like get a little delirious and bleary-eyed looking at this stuff. So second sets of eyes are great. It's perfect. So I appreciate it, and I will try to take care of posting that new set of minutes this week, just with the added document.
Great. So the other bit of business is, I'm sorry, Annie, that that we had gotten from Brian Ballantyne, right?
Yep.
And
Yeah.
I think it's fair that we can mention this because it's, it's procedural kind of.
Yeah.
Sure.
So, we heard from Brian Ballantyne, just, a notification that we're starting the budget process for next year. Asking us to take a look at our budget and see if we, would like to request any, changes or additions to our budget. So as of right now for this year, we only have one line item. We have $1,000 for, the line is technically called outreach and education, which we have reserved for 10 historic house signs at $100 each. So far, we haven't spent any of that money this year, mostly as a result of not having a vendor to do the signs. My understanding is that still in, we're still trying to find someone to help with that so we can kind of resume the historic house sign program. So, my feeling is based on the fact that we haven't spent any money this year. It doesn't seem like we're in a position to be asking for even more money. But I, wanted to run that by the commission, see what you guys think. Or, if there are any initiatives that, we need to consider adding, or changing our current initiatives, based on the budget. So I will say that the deadline to submit budgets is Friday, November 21st. So we will have another meeting before we have to respond back to Brian and the town. So, this may not be something we need to vote on tonight. But I wanted to at least mention that to you guys, that it's, something that the town is asking us to address.
I'm glad November 21st is actually a Monday. So
Oh,
that may be it. But in any case, we have a meeting now scheduled on the 17th, which is absolutely
Yeah.
fantastic because it gives us some time to think about it. If there's, I can imagine some things we even talked about taking a spot at Heritage Day. We talked about in the previous meeting, maybe this oral history thing. I don't know if there's any costs associated with that, but can everybody sort of take this under advisement and think about what we want to do? And I will make sure it's an agenda item. Please, Annie, remind me if I airy and forget.
Yeah.
That we need to have a serious discussion about this on the 17th. I don't anticipate, frankly, anything big, and I think it'd be appreciated if we keep our
So
ask.
the memo from Brian does say Friday, November 21st.
Oh.
So, and obviously I just looked at the calendar. I know it's not,
Yeah.
but I should probably confirm with him if he means Friday, the 18th
Hmm.
or Monday, the 21st. Just so, if we do have some discussion on the 17th, the urgency to get back to him.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yep.
That sounds fantastic. Public comment. Oh, come on, Marcy and Sam. I guess not. All right, going once. Let me do that. Going twice. No? Okay, friends. That would lead us to adjournment. I would take a motion to adjourn.
All right, I make a motion to adjourn at 9:24 PM.
Second.
Andy, why don't you do it?
Me?
Yeah.
Okay, second.
All right,
Thanks. I
motion
typed you in.
motion made and seconded, and we have an empty glass for, what do you do with your colleagues not here or something? Spill out some water. Any case, roll call vote, Miller, aye.
Battles, aye.
Pfaff, aye.
Barrington, aye.
And I appreciate the fact that when I said aye, then you all said aye rather than yes. I think
Oh,
previously
I just
I
noticed
said
that. Yeah.
yes, and then I went with the aye because it just sounds more, anyway, all right. Thank you very much, folks, and I bid you adieu and good adieu. And good.
So long, farewell.
Thank you so much.
Excellent. Thanks, everyone.
Good night.
Night, everybody.
Good night.